My name is Evelyn. The first time I met his family, they smiled like a test. I wore a dress I saved for weddings. I practiced polite laughter for days. His mother looked me up and down like a judge. His father never hid his boredom. His sister watched like a hawk. That night they said things I would feel for years. You do not fit our standard, his mother said as if it was law. We expect a certain life, his father said. Everyone nodded. I kept my voice small. I smiled. I thought kindness would fix loneliness. After dinner she took my hand. Her fingers were cool. We want someone who understands our world, she said. Not someone who struggles for it. She meant my job. She meant my background. She meant me. The room felt smaller. My promise to myself tightened like a fist. He did not pull me away. He watched them instruct me and he watched me accept it. I felt the invitation to step aside. I felt the sharp tilt of marriage toward their idea of success. That kitchen table was no longer ours. It belonged to them. We left early. He said nothing. I drove home in a fog of shame. I fed my son frozen pizza and pretended the night was nothing. I told myself it was a rough evening. I told myself I had chosen him. Weeks passed. Their comments were small and steady. A barb compliment here. A lecture about social circles there. They questioned my clothes. They advised our wedding guest list like it was a business deal. Each slight stained me. Each slight widened the crack. Then, at a gallery opening, something changed. I had painted all week. My hands were sore. I had baked bread for the reception. I had paid the deposit with my savings. I hung the canvases with care. I watched strangers study color and line. It felt honest. A man in a dark suit stopped in front of my largest painting. He did not look like a critic. He looked like someone who had money and did not bother to hide it. He held a glass of wine and he studied the brushwork as if he had studied lives. My husband waved from the other side of the room. His mother smiled with the thin practiced warmth of a socialite. She raised her glass at me as if testing my reaction. I lifted my chin. The man stepped closer. He did not ask to buy a print. He asked about process. He asked simply, "Did you paint this?" I nodded. He said, "You have a natural eye." His voice did not carry a lesson. It carried curiosity. He introduced himself. His name was Maxwell Hale. He was new to the city. He said he collected work and he supported artists. He asked if the piece was available to purchase. My chest thudded. My prices were humble. My bills were not. I told him the price with my voice steady. He did not blink. He paid cash. Not for one piece. For the entire show. He wrote a check that made the room shift. The faces at the edge of the gallery drained. His mother paled. My husband looked small. People flocked like birds to a storm. Cameras found Maxwell as if he owned the light. I did not know why the reaction was so violent. I only felt it. I felt his money move the air in the room. I felt his arrival rearrange the guest list. I felt my husband's stiff pose. I felt his mother hold her napkin like a white flag. Maxwell smiled at me like a man who had found a path he liked. He said, "Your work should be seen. Let me help." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to say no to every hand that had once smoothed over my edges. But when we left the gallery, his mother cornered me with a stare like a verdict. Her face had gone pale. She asked one question so small and dangerous I could still taste it. "Who is he?" I opened my mouth to answer. I paused. I saw my husband's jaw tighten the way people clamp when a secret walks into daylight. Then Maxwell called my name from across the street and unexpectedly waved. The woman who had judged me looked at him again. Her eyes found mine. They were not only surprised. They were afraid. Only a fragment, not from here. And we must act. That night I found an email. Not addressed to me. Not meant for me. It landed in a folder I had learned to check. It came from a private assistant. It said, "Maxwell Hale has a history. He rewrites family stories. He gives a woman a way out. He breaks other people's rules." Signed with a name I recognized. His mother. My breath hitched. I felt like I had stepped into a book with a villain. The email said more. He was not just a collector. He was a philanthropist who reshaped circles. He liked to buy art and he liked to buy changes. The file attached a list of names. My in-laws were on it. So was a list of benefits. The words looked like a ledger of power. That week changes came at home. Invitations arrived for parties we did not usually attend. I watched my husband accept without asking me. He spoke in polite voice when he called. He wore a suit that did not fit his shoulders yet. He carried himself like a man who suddenly wanted a corner seat. I asked him if he liked Maxwell. He said, "He is interesting." He did not say more. He did not say whether the interest was dangerous or salvation. I started to notice small things. Bank transfers from accounts I did not know. A credit card with a name I had never heard. My husband grew secretive with his phone. He would step out of the room with an excuse. I found a receipt for a flight for two to an island with a resort name I could not afford for a weekend. I kept collecting. Luck or instinct had taught me how to read small things. I saved emails, I screenshot messages, and I printed receipts. I made a pile on my kitchen table and I watched the pile grow. Then Maxwell invited me to a luncheon. It would be in a private room. He said his friend wanted to meet me. He promised nothing. He only said the word again. Support. At the luncheon a man rose. He was not new to me. He was not the type who tossed money around. He had the look of a person born into capital. He smiled without apology. When he introduced himself, people leaned in. "Good afternoon," he said. "I am Thomas Ridley." The name landed like an orchestra. He moved like someone used to command, not ask. He studied me like a connoisseur reads a painting. His presence tightened the air. My in-laws stopped clapping. Their hands went cold. My husband forgot his pretense. He swallowed hard. I watched the blood drain from their faces. Thomas spoke plainly. "Evelyn, I have followed your work. I collect a different type of art. I invest in people who have grit. I want to back you." The room went quiet. He reached into his wallet and wrote a number on a napkin. He slid it across. The digits made my mouth dry. He did not offer charity. He offered patronage that would change life as much as any marriage. He offered to underwrite a show. He offered a grant to support my studio for 2 years. He spoke of galleries and residencies and a foundation fund. My in-laws left the room. Their faces were white. My husband looked as if someone had taken a photograph of him and removed the background. He was suddenly smaller than the chair he had chosen. When Thomas stood to leave, he said into the crowd, "I do not back everything. I back truth. I back work that demands respect. I will arrange introductions. I will host a private acquisition. This will be public soon." Their faces fell into cracks. The roar of polite chatter felt like thunder. I realized at once what had happened. The standard my in-laws demanded was a gate. They had held a key. A billionaire had just put his hand on the gate. The key was not theirs anymore. My husband whispered in my ear, "This will ruin everything." His words trembled. I felt the house tilt. I felt the family line drawn in the dirt. I did not yet understand which side would break first. That night I could not sleep. My mind buzzed with napkin digits and conversations. Thomas Ridley's number twined around my head like a new nerve. I did not know him. I did not know what it meant to be chosen by a man like him. I only knew the faces I saw vanish when he spoke. My husband paced. He moved like an animal adjusting to new territory. Our marriage had become a triage between desire and fear. He wanted the life he imagined. I wanted to keep the life I had earned. We no longer spoke the same language. I began to gather evidence slowly. Not because I planned a war. Because I feared one. I started with the small things. The receipts. The odd transfers. The dinner reservations in a name I did not recognize. I printed everything. I made a stack so that when I looked at it I could see a map. At the bottom of a folder I found a contract with a boutique name. The signature matched his. The billing showed an address I did not know. A quick search showed that address belonged to a small downtown office. The office belonged to a company set up less than a year ago. Jack, the private investigator friend of Danielle's, came in with a list. He had a way of finding the parts that hide behind neat lines. He passed me a timeline. The timeline drew arcs from our joint account to a shell corporation. It listed flights. It listed hotel check-ins. It listed dinners with names that matched the guest lists my in-laws worshipped. Someone paid for your husband to be useful, Jack said plainly. They invested in him as a node. He became their broker. He thinks it is access. It is control. I felt a chill cut my throat. Someone else had bought him, had arranged his life like a stage where the family would perform a role. Jack dug deeper. He filed for public records. He traced company registrations. He found a pattern of small monthly transfers. Not enough to flag a bank. Enough to fund dinners, to buy favors, to book a single trip here and there. The transfers were clever. I felt the anger rise. Not at Maxwell. Not at Thomas. At an older, colder hunger. At people who measure the world in standards like boxes. One late night I found a note in our mailbox. Not stamped. Not signed. A single line written in a careful hand. If you let go, we will pick up what falls. They sounded like nurses preparing for surgery. The tone was not threat. It was instruction. I showed it to Carmen. She clasped the paper and did not flinch. They see you as a liability, she said. They will move to isolate you. They will call you unstable. They will rewrite your story. I realized I needed more than receipts. I needed witnesses. I needed a story of truth they could not buy. I needed people who had felt the edge of their demands. I called my neighbor. She had seen my husband leave one night with a suitcase. She had noted a different car in the drive. She agreed to sign a statement. I called clients who had commissioned small works. They remembered dinners the husband attended, and the way he boasted about introductions. They were willing to say it into paper. Danielle reached out to Thomas's assistant. It was a thin lead. The assistant was careful. She said Thomas liked to remain shadowsome. She said he did not need publicity. But she left one piece of information. Thomas had wired $3,000 that morning in support. The memo read, "For creative advancement." It was a phrase that would become important. As the pile grew, I felt the world shift. Thomas's check had its own gravity. He could level a family with a smile. He could back museums. He could buy rooms in which the in-laws had always sat like monarchs. Still, evidence is not truth without meaning. I worked to connect dots. I matched receipts to dates when my husband showed his face in private rooms, and then made a claim in public. I tracked a purchase of art frames under the shell company. I found a wire that matched a credit card payment for an apartment lease. One night Jack brought a photo. The photo showed a quiet building with a doorbell marked with a company name. On the same image, a delivery slip showed a time and a signature. He circled the signature. It matched a name my husband used for corporate expense reports. We built the binder slowly and carefully. Each page had a source. Each source had a backup. We numbered exhibits and logged timestamps. My handwriting cramped by the end of the night from labeling. The binder grew heavy like armor. Still, there was a question that tugged at my sleeve. Why would Thomas pick me? Why step into this messy life to buy my work? I called his number. His assistant answered with a quiet voice. She requested a meeting. When we met, Thomas did not talk much about money. He talked about what he liked. He said, "I back people who build, people who make things. I do not like false standards." He smiled at the phrase and did not look at my husband. That phrasing felt like a hinge. He did not ask me to betray marriage. He asked me to claim my life. He said, "If you want support, take it. If you do not, I will walk away." That night my husband called me. He had found a letter. The letter was not mine. It was engraved with a crest I recognized from his mother's stash. It said simply, "We will not let you ride his coin." He paused. "Do you understand what this means?" His voice broke. I did not answer. I already knew. The letter from his mother arrived like a verdict. "We will not let you ride his coin." The sentence felt like a trap closing. I read it again and again. It was a warning dressed as a family code. They were threatened. They planned to respond. I needed allies who knew both law and the unspoken rules of private power. Danielle kept calling names. Jack lined up records. Carmen, the lawyer, agreed to take my case on a contingency we could afford. She spoke plainly. "This is more than art. This is influence. We will build a legal perimeter. We will make it expensive for them to attack you." We planned in the small hours. The house filled with papers. We set roles. Carmen took custody of the bank records and the shell company trail. Jack traced the car rentals and the apartment leases. Danielle chased witness statements. Lena, a friend who ran small PR quietly for creative people, agreed to craft a public narrative that would not feel like spectacle. We mapped goals. The first objective was to secure the studio account. Thomas had wired funds that morning to an account reserved for creative advancement. Carmen worked to create a holding agreement so we could not be stripped of support before we used it. The second objective was to document interference. We wanted records of the in-laws' patterns and their threats. The third objective was to secure a public step that would show the world I was not a problem to fix but a person to protect. Each task had deadlines. We rehearsed language for press. Short lines. Simple claims. No melodrama. Carmen insisted. We will not appear as a wronged artist sobbing in a gallery. We will be precise, calm, and legally firm. We set a timeline that matched the social calendar. The in-laws had a charity gala in 3 weeks. If we moved before the gala, we would shock them. If we waited, we risked their network stepping in to drown us in influence. Carmen advised moving in 10 days. The team began quiet work. Jack interviewed the concierge at the downtown office. She confirmed packages. She signed an affidavit. Danielle sat with neighbors who saw the suites rented and the dinners attended. Lena built a list of credible journalists who care about art and about hidden power. At night, my son slept in the next room. I measured every step by his breath. I could not be reckless. I could not be dramatic. I kept repeating 3 rules I wrote on a sticky note. Protect the child. Keep evidence. Control the narrative. Then our world cracked open in a way none of us expected. A reporter from a local paper asked to meet me at a cafe. Lena had made the call discreetly. The reporter wanted a short Q&A, nothing public. I met him with the binder in a tote bag. He listened without judgment. I showed him a receipt. He noted it slowly. If this is true, he said, this would not just be a personal story. It would show how money rewrites social ladders. It is worth following. He promised to hold the file until we were ready to release. The promise mattered. It was a safety line. Back at home, Carmen drafted legal moves. She wrote a cease and desist to the in-laws to stop interference. She prepared to file for a protective order if threats continued. Jack found evidence that one of the shell accounts had been used to sponsor a small charity that the in-laws promoted. The money looped in a way that suggested influence laundering. Then the in-laws struck first. A short letter arrived from their attorney. Carmen read it and then passed it to me. You would be wise to decline outside funding. We will pursue every legal channel to challenge any financial arrangement that undermines family control. The letter was polite. It was thinly veiled threat. I answered with calm. Carmen sent a response that stated legal facts. We were not hiding. We were not ashamed. We were gathering proof. Her response was short. We will proceed within the law. Any attempts to intimidate will be documented. The letter was a shield with teeth. Things intensified. My husband began to choose sides more clearly. He missed a parent-teacher night. He canceled dinners. He told me money would ruin civility. I told him money had not chosen civility. He avoided my eyes. Lena pushed me and said, public control is subtle. When you step into the light, you must not blink. She rehearsed short lines with me. She practiced a single phrase I would repeat if asked. I am an artist. I am a mother. I ask only to be judged by my work and my care. The phrase felt like armor. Then, 10 days later, an invitation arrived. The in-laws were hosting a private dinner that included donors and board members of a foundation Thomas supported. They had sent it as a maneuver. They expected me to attend or to be noticed for not attending. The dinner was a stage to shame me. Carmen said we had 2 options: attend and face them, or avoid them and move to publish the pieces that would make their network uncomfortable. The choice felt like a knife. I looked at the binder. I looked at my son asleep. I thought of Thomas and the napkin number. I thought of a life where my paintings hung on public walls, and the dinner table gossip no longer decided my fate. I chose a third path. I wrote a brief note to Thomas asking to meet him at his office the next morning. I sealed the note and watched Danielle drive it to her assistant. When she returned, her face was pale. He replied, she said. He says come tonight. He says bring nothing but yourself. The words felt like a promise and like a warning at once. The night I walked into Thomas Ridley's office, the city looked like a bed of lights. I carried nothing but confidence and a small folder. The guard ushered me in. The elevator smelled like leather and new money. I rehearsed a simple line. I will not be told who I am. I kept it as an anchor. Thomas greeted me in a room lined with books. He wore a plain suit and he did not ask for proof at first. He asked about my work. He asked about the time I spent in the studio. He listened like someone who had patience he did not need to show. I found his manner honest, which made me on guard. I told him my history. I told him about a family that measured people by pedigree. I told him the gallery and the napkin. He listened and then he paused. I do not break things to enjoy it, he said. I disrupt systems so they are fairer. I invest where the gatekeepers would rather die than admit talent. The words were a mirror. He did not promise to rescue me. He proposed a strategy. If I back you, they will not be able to control you through social pressure. If I back you discreetly, you build independence. If they attack, you will have resources and counsel. I asked how he would do it. He outlined steps. He would underwrite a solo show in a neutral city. He would fund a residency. He would arrange 3 collector meetings. He would introduce me to a curator who had nothing to do with my in-laws. The plan was blunt and efficient. No fanfare, no spectacle. He called it structural support. Carmen had warned about speed. We needed a legal frame. I made a call. Carmen moved to create a holding trust for the funds. The trust would pay the studio rent and cover legitimate expenses. It would be sealed to protect the support from interference. Thomas approved. We called this the counterplan. It was more than money. It was a way to change the map of people who owned our choices. Step 1. Secure funds and keep them beyond reach. Step 2. Build a public season that could not be erased by gossip. Step 3. Document interference. Step 4. If they stepped in, we struck legally and publicly with evidence. We set dates. The residency in 6 weeks. The show in 3 months. The public reveals would be staggered. Carmen recommended a release schedule. A legal strike first to prevent asset freezing. Then a targeted public reveal showing the chain of influence. Then press engagements that focus on my work, not the scandal. We rehearsed the language I would use under pressure. Short lines. Solid claims. No emotion. I practiced them until they felt like a muscle memory. Then small victories arrived. Jack secured affidavits from a vendor who had not been paid. He found a contract where my husband's name appeared as a guarantor for an unknown company. Lena coordinated a private writer who prepared a profile on me focused on craft. It was safe, elegant. On the 4th week, the family noticed movement. The in-laws called old trustees. They sent a letter to Thomas asking for assurances. He replied with a single line that stood like a wall. My support will be used for art. It will not be weaponized. That line enraged them more than any direct insult. They understood he could not easily be punished. But the plan carried risk. The more visible my work became, the more reason my in-laws had to strike. Carmen prepared for that. She filed a protective motion to prevent interference with patrons. She asked the court to prevent any party from making public claims that would intimidate donors. It was a new legal front. In the 5th week, his mother made a move. A social whisper blossomed into a printed piece. Anonymous notes arrived at my studio. One piece of paper scored across the front read, "You are not welcome in our world." It was childish and dangerous. Danielle burned it. She called me frantic and tender. I held the binder and I thought of 1,000 small insults. I thought of a child who would grow up thinking silence is the answer. I thought of Thomas's napkin and the number on it. We accelerated. We filed the legal motions faster. Carmen pushed the hold on the trust to be ironclad. Jack increased surveillance. Lena briefed the profile piece to go live the same week as the residency announcement. Then the in-laws escalated. At a board meeting of a foundation they partially controlled, my husband presented a motion to disinvest from a gallery that planned to showcase independent artists. He framed it as fiscal prudence. He used their language. He called me a risk. Carmen moved like a chess player. She filed a notice to the board showing conflict of interest. She sent copies to media on an embargo. She called the gallery director and asked him to delay votes. The director, haunted by donors and reputation, hesitated. Our counterplan had raised a hand. That evening a photo appeared on social media. It showed my husband and his mother smiling at a gala. Someone had scrawled across the picture, "Save the family." The message read like a threat and an appeal. I tapped the screen. My phone chimed with a new message from an unknown number. "Pull back, or we will make sure your son never belongs." The message about my son was not a threat to me alone. It was a dagger toward his life. The line about belonging trembled like a promise. I read it again and my hands went cold. Carmen took the message without flinch. "Document it. We bring this to the judge if they move." She called the sheriff's department and logged the harassment. Jack took prints. Lena archived the social posts. We had planned to announce the residency and the profile that week. The calendar still read our dates. The show could go live, or we could pause. Pause felt like surrender. Continue felt like a gamble that could make the fight fiercer. At dawn the foundation called. The board would convene an emergency vote. My husband was pushing the narrative. He wanted the gallery to be cut off. He wanted the network to close ranks. He wanted me to be a cautionary tale. We pivoted. Carmen altered the schedule. We moved some public pieces forward. We prepared a legal filing aimed at forcing transparency from the foundation. We drafted a statement for the press to say simply, "This is about art. This is about fairness." No melodrama. No tearful confessions. Carmen insisted. But the foundations of power shifted faster than we could plan. That afternoon someone leaked an edited transcript of a private conversation. The transcript made me look ungrateful. It made me seem to mock the family. It sprayed mud across the careful profile. Lena fought to contain it. She pushed verified links. She called the reporter. She sent the full transcripts. She arranged for Thomas's assistant to corroborate facts. But mud is sticky. The in-laws had used their reach. That night he posted a long statement on his social feed. He called me opportunistic. He called Thomas a recruiter of scandal. The post had a line that bruised me. He wrote, "I will not let strangers buy my family." The words sounded noble to those who did not know how he had sold himself. Carmen prepared the subpoena. She wanted to force the foundation to produce minutes and records. She wanted to show the money trail. She wanted to reveal the soft touch that had turned my husband into a broker of influence. Jack worked with a forensic accountant. They traced a suspicious donation from a donor network to a small event that had been used to introduce my husband to Maxwell. The accountant mapped the donor patterns. They looked like careful handshakes. We prepared our public move. The plan changed that night. We would not only reveal the patronage, we would show the quiet loop of influence that had bought my family's approval and my husband's cooperation. We would demand transparency from the foundation. But the pivot meant risk. It would make them fight in public. It would bring my son into the glare. The unknown number's message was a warning and a promise. At midnight a text arrived. One line. "We pulled the legal file on your son's school. Be ready." The words were precise. They suggested a strike on a place I had thought safe. Carmen looked at me. Her face was stone. "They will try to hit where it hurts." I breathed out and I said, "Then we get louder. We expose everything." The morning was raw. The school's front office called. They had received an inquiry about my file. They were worried. My son's attendance record had been questioned. A social worker had been sent to review his home situation. The message wanted proof of stability. They wanted documentation. I felt the floor tilt. This was the wedge they had warned about. A legal strike on my child's security. Carmen moved through the steps with a calm I envied. She called the school council. She sent our protective orders. She filed emergency motions. She had affidavits from neighbors, proof of stable income from the trust, and a letter from Thomas confirming support for my family's welfare. The media smelled blood. Cameras arrived at the school in a rush. The foundation's board prepared statements. My husband posted a video imploring concern for the child. He framed it as a matter of propriety. The in-laws posted thinly veiled pleas. The world divided. We had rehearsed truth like lines. We did not waver. Carmen coordinated a press release timed to the court filings. Lena delivered high-quality documents to a few trusted outlets. Jack released a packet of receipts and contracts with an affidavit that explained the chain: donations, introductions, dinners, and the path of influence. At 10 a.m., the first sealed filing hit the judge's e-portal. The judge's clerk confirmed receipt and scheduled an expedited hearing. The court would see the network and the money. The court would see the donor loops. The court would see a man used as a middleman. By noon, the city feeds were collaged with receipts and headlines. People who once nodded at my husband's family began to frown. The board withdrew their motion to exclude the gallery. Donors expressed concern. The foundation's chair called a meeting to discuss governance. That afternoon, I drove to the school. I walked through the carpool line and I watched my son climb the steps. I did not let him see my face fall. This war had teeth but not yet claws. At the expedited hearing, the judge's tone was sharp. He asked why a family would weaponize an institute against a child. Carmen presented our protective materials. She read a statement from Thomas confirming his intention to fund the studio and the residency. She read the affidavit that Jack had prepared about the donor pattern. Then we made our public play. Lena played a brief clip of internal documents with redactions. The clip showed a donor list, transfers that matched dinners, and a note: "Bring him into the circle." The judge leaned forward. The courtroom felt like a theater built for truth. Witnesses stepped forward. The boutique owner recounted invoices. The concierge described deliveries. The jeweler confirmed a payment. Each voice was a small hammer. They added weight. Outside, the in-laws looked thin and brittle. Their network could not deny the facts. They had expected to control the noise. Instead, their noise drowned them. At the end of the day, the judge declined to remove my son. He issued an order limiting the in-laws' access to school records until the investigation cleared. The judge set a timetable for further discovery. It was not a full win. It was a barricade. As the courtroom emptied, my husband met me in the hallway. He raised his voice. He demanded I stop. He accused me of weaponizing the child. He called me reckless and cruel. I held the binder steady. I felt the air in the corridor press against my ribs. I said, "You went on television and called me a risk. You tried to use our son as a club. That ends now." My voice did not tremble. It had a plainness that surprised him. He stepped closer. His hand brushed my arm like a warning. Then a man's voice behind him made both of us turn. Thomas was there. He had arrived without notice. He did not glare. He did not attack. He faced the family with a calm that shut their breath. He said, "This will proceed by law. I will not be bullied into silence. Evelyn is under my patronage. She will receive protection. And if anyone harms her son's welfare for private advantage, I will ensure they answer under oath." His words landed like a wall. The in-laws looked smaller than a family portrait. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a news alert. A prominent donor had withdrawn funds from the foundation. On the screen, a headline promised, "Scandal ripples through city elite." Below the headline, an anonymous tipster had posted a photograph of a safe deposit ledger. The ledger had a new name circled in red. It was my husband's. The photograph of the safe deposit ledger spread like fire. People texted with screenshots. I watched the number of unread messages climb. Thomas called to say a major donor had already stepped in to request an audit. The foundation's board would need to answer public questions. Cameras found the in-laws outside their townhouse. They tried to smile for the press. Their smiles broke like old plaster. My husband's voice sounded hollow. He gave a statement that tried to frame me as the provocateur. I wanted calm. She chose chaos, he said. That afternoon, the foundation posted a brief notice. They would conduct a full review of governance and sponsorships. The board chair announced a committee. The words were official but soft. Their soft words had teeth in them. On social feeds, the tide shifted. People who once called my in-laws pillars now asked for transparency. #ArtNotGatekeeping trended in a small thread. The gallery director I had met early in the process called to say staff were frightened and grateful. He asked to set a date for my show. Felt like a miracle. But the in-laws unleashed a counterattack. Old letters surfaced appearing to show my husband's signature, promising loyalty to family causes. They sent fragments of private messages to select journalists. They made accusations of my using Thomas for attention. The pushback focused on peeling away my public support. The legal front flared. The Foundation's counsel wrote a letter asking for temporary restraint on public claims. Carmen answered with evidence. She posted a well-sourced memo to trusted outlets. The documents had timestamps and sworn affidavits. The debate moved from gossip to audit. Then a new threat emerged. An anonymous envelope with legal papers landed at my son's school. It contained a thin complaint that claimed the child was exposed to unstable environments. The school called. The district stepped in. I felt my stomach drop. Carmen filed an emergency response and asked the court to consider the envelope as part of the pattern. She demanded sanctions for those who used institutions to harass families. The judge agreed to review. Meanwhile, Thomas acted as a public anchor. He attended the gallery's staff meeting. He shook hands with the director and he spoke plainly about the need for art that does not bow to closed circles. He attended one of my classes at the studio and sat in the back quietly as I taught. People noticed. The narrative shifted further. Instead of a scandal built on whisper, it looked like a family trying to guard their gates against a woman with talent. That optics change matters. Then reality cut in. An investigative reporter called. He told me he had found a ledger that tied a series of donor meetings to a list of favors. The ledger suggested that my in-laws had traded introductions for influence. It was a slow burn of accusation. Cameras watched their home. The in-laws met with trustees. They begged for calm. Yet the more they tried to recover, the deeper they sank. One trustee resigned in protest. Another demanded a public review. At home I prepared for hearings. I taught my son to fold paper boats. He asked about the news like a child unsure how to hold an adult storm. I wanted to promise him a life free from the way the world measured worth. I could not, but I could try to change the way the world acted. One night as we ate dinner, my husband's phone rang. He answered with a voice that cut into the room. It was his sister. She spoke in a hush and then hissed a single sentence into the phone. My husband listened, then paled. His mouth opened and then closed. He covered the receiver with his palm. They found something, he said. Before I could ask, his phone lit up with a text. He read it and turned his face away as if the light burned him. He did not speak. Danielle grabbed the device. The message preview showed a line. It read, Vault 2. Check the codes. We will not fall alone. I felt the muscle in my jaw clench. Carmen's voice was low. They have more to hide. The house felt suddenly smaller. I looked at my son and I realized we were in the middle of a puzzle someone else had planned. We had to finish it. The next morning a story broke. A bank official confirmed an investigation into irregular sponsor transfers linked to the foundation. The press called it a governance crisis. The hashtag numbers climbed in hours. Boardrooms trembled. At the courthouse a small crowd gathered again. The judge set new hearings and ordered discovery. We moved into a world of subpoenas and sworn statements. The in-laws hired counsel who specialized in quiet settlements. My husband looked exhausted. He did not meet my eyes. Thomas became more public. He gave an interview about culture, about supporting unrecognized talent. He spoke gently about my work and about ensuring children were not used as weapons. The interview shifted trust. People who had only known dinner party gossip turned toward large truths. They listened. But the war did not stop. The in-laws struck where they thought it would hurt most. My son's school called for yet another meeting. The district asked for a home visit. The social worker came to our door with soft eyes. I handed over documents that Carmen had prepared. She checked every line and nodded. The court did something unexpected. It issued a temporary injunction preventing any party from making public claims that would affect the child's welfare. The media could report on the investigation, but not on the family dynamics in harmful ways. It felt like protection and like a limitation at once. At home the nights stretched long. I lived in deadlines and exhibitions. I rehearsed testimony. I mediated interviews. I held my son and taught him multiplication tables like an anchor in a storm. Then the in-laws council made a move that shocked us. They petitioned to freeze the trust Thomas had created until a full review could be done. In essence, they tried to cut off my support. Carmen moved immediately. She filed emergency pleadings to protect the trust, and she asked Thomas to testify in court to the intent of the funds. Court reporters circled the calendar. Thomas flew in. He answered questions under oath about the funds and the intent. He explained he had no personal knowledge of manipulations by my in-laws. His testimony was clear and it hurt them where it counted. The judge ruled we could access funds under supervision. Outside, the in-laws' network weakened. A few trustees resigned in shame. Stocks dipped for a company where old friends held seats. Privilege sputtered. But the boy who had watched this all decide fate had not been untouched. My son began to ask questions in small ways. At bedtime he would ask whether people who were mean were always powerful. I would say, "Power is not always right." He would nod half asleep. Then the worst message came from a place I trusted. The school sent a confidential note. Someone had requested my address under a public records inquiry. The note suggested someone wanted to map our home visits. Carmen said it was stalking. Jack said it was escalatory. Lena said it was predictable. We increased security. We had monitors. We changed routines. We felt the world tilt like a tree under wind. Still, even as the pressure grew, a strange thing happened. People wrote to me. Artists with small studios sent notes. Collectors I had never met offered small shows. A gallery director in a city 3 hours away asked if I would consider a show. Thomas said quietly, "This will end well. Keep going." I felt the future like warmth. The balance of power had shifted. The in-laws tried to claw back. They spent money on reputation repair. They hired PR and counsel. But the ledger had teeth now. One evening Carmen handed me a sealed envelope from the court file. She did not speak. She slid it across the table. Inside was a single sheet. It read in bold, "Subpoena issued to family vault. Inventory to be revealed." The room felt suddenly very full. My breath came quick. We had opened a box that could not be pushed closed. The subpoena to the family vault arrived like a bell. The court appointed an independent auditor. The vault had been a myth in our social circles. The vault had also been the place where influence lived. It held deeds, letters, and sometimes favors that were traded like currency. The audit took 2 weeks. I watched with a patience that was sharp and cold. Carmen sat with me and read through line items. Jack verified signatures. Lena coordinated media with careful restraint. The vault inventory did not simply contain ledgers. It contained promises. It contained transfers. It contained a note with a name I had seen before on a canceled invoice. It contained a list of donors and the beneficiaries of favors. It contained a ledger of favors paid through art purchases. Their faces went pale when the items were read aloud in the courtroom. A trustee who had once smiled at dinners confessed to accepting funds in exchange for introductions. He wept and apologized. The press printed the first page of the inventory. The city that once admired lineage now frowned at the evidence. The fallout was large and messy. Investigations expanded. Trustees resigned. Donors issued apologies. The charitable boards were shaken. The in-laws retreated from public positions. My husband sat at the table and listened to people I did not know discuss his name with caution. Thomas stood with me in small ways. He did not seek cameras for his role. He signed a letter to the foundation asking for reform. He offered scholarships to young artists outside the old circles. He said quietly, "This was never about show. It is about fair access." My show opened 3 months later. The room was full. People I had never known stood before my work and said, "Your lines cut deep." They meant my paint and they meant my story. My son stood at my side and clapped as if he had always known the world could be better. My in-laws moved away from the city to a quieter existence. They wrote a notice that their public life would be reduced. They kept private estates and private grief. I wished no harm and yet I felt a clean relief. In time my husband asked for divorce. He said he needed time to find himself. The judge finalized the end with a measured signature. The division was structured. Carmen ensured my studio remained secure. The trust continued under oversight for my son's education. In private, I thought about power. It had always been about who gets to define the rules. For years other people had held a key. Then a man with money and a belief in craft placed one more key on the table. We used it. We did not break anyone more than they had broken us. I do not tell this story to boast. I tell it because systems can be bent toward fairness. Evidence matters. Allies matter. Law can be a shield when power becomes a club. If this story resonates, remember a few simple things. Keep your records. Find counsel who speaks plainly. Build a circle that believes in you. Do not let others write your worth in small fonts. If you are fighting anything like this, seek professional help. Speak to a lawyer. Document the wrongs. Protect the children and the art. The world may be harsh, but it can also be corrected. Subscribe for more stories about people who turned harm into justice. Share this story if you know someone who might need courage. And remember, no one should be judged by someone else's standard. Build your own. I am Evelyn. I painted my way back. I chose enough of myself to refuse small verdicts, and I chose truth as my tool.